So this workshop, or rather this presentation, is aiming at explaining the learning architecture that we use at Cranbourne Secondary College. We have titled this learning architecture Designing for Learning. And the reason, I guess, that we have done that is that purposeful, intentional design for the students that we have, not the students we think or wish we had, and for the context we work in, not the context that we think we work in, is very important to achieve growth for all our students, irrespective of their point of entry, and to close the gap between where the student's entry point is and where they need to be in order to experience success across the curriculum. So essentially, this is the underpinning of the learning architecture. The underpinning is that we at all times should aim to close the gap and to make sure that every student achieves growth, a year's growth for a year's teaching, irrespective of their point of entry. So let's begin by establishing the purpose for the learning. So why are we taking part in this workshop? Why are we inviting you to learn about this learning architecture? And allow me to start with the why. The purpose of our lesson will have the what, the how, and the why. Allow me to start with the why. So why should we continuously seek to improve the way we teach and the way we address teaching and learning in our school? And allow me to give the answer by drawing from the research, and more specifically from the work of the OECD and the specific research that Andreas Scheichler presented to us in 2017. And it goes like this. It states that all countries have excellent students, but few countries enable all their students to excel. So I guess we need to be looking at this statement very carefully, because we know that in every school, in every classroom, in every context, there will be the students that bring with them the dispositions and the readiness to excel. What we need to be looking at, though, is how every student, irrespective of who they are, irrespective of what readiness they bring and what disposition they bring, are supported to excel at their own pace and to be able to show that there has been a growth in their learning. Something else that comes from that particular research is that achieving greater equity in education is not only a social justice imperative, and we know that we can only equalize the world through education. It's also a way to resource more effectively, ensure that all individuals can contribute to their societies and promote social cohesion. Now, that is all captured in the Melbourne Declaration, or as it is now in the Alice Springs Declaration. And it totally aligns with the principles of the Melbourne Declaration. So I've chosen this particular research for that specific reason, that it does align with the research that has informed the Victorian curriculum, and before that the Wells and Oswells, and the Australian curriculum for that matter. The last point in this research is that how we educate the most vulnerable children provides a deep reflection of who we are as peoples. So what is it that we value in society? What do we as individuals, our school, our region, our country, what does the world value in education? And as I said when I first started, it is about equalizing the world through education. And I guess that statement is supported by this particular research. So let's now go to the how. How do we continuously improve the way that we do teaching and learning? So what we've learned from FISO, which is, I guess, a synthesis of a huge body of research and distilled into particular dot points. The first is that the way that we continuously improve how we implement teaching and learning is that schools need to embed a culture of curriculum planning and assessment, and also being able to assess the impact of the programs that they implement. So what's happening in many schools is that something new, something is in vogue, or something someone saw or heard about in a particular professional learning, and it may be that, you know, they come back to their school and say, let's do that. Whilst nothing is wrong with innovation, what the research is asking us to do is two things really fundamentally. The first is to be consistent, not to keep changing all the time. And secondly, that whatever it is that we have identified as important to implement really needs to be measured consistently as to the kind of impact that it has on the learning of the students. And if the impact is not a year's learning for a year's teaching, or that every student will grow irrespective of their point of entry, then we need to make adjustments to those programs to ensure that it suits the individual needs of all the students that we have and supports the students to reach their potential. The other thing that we are learning from FISO, the synthesis of the research, is that we need to strengthen our understanding of data literacy. We need to be able to strengthen the way we understand assessment, and especially assessment data. We know that assessment drives the learning, and we know that part of that assessment process, the formative, the summative, is also feedback, and that being able to have the three together, a very effective and contextually appropriate and evidence-based and evidence-driven formative assessment practices, tiered, summative assessment that is designed to allow students to show their growth and allow teachers to be able to measure student growth, I guess, through the impact of the teaching and learning. And also a mechanism of feedback that involves the learner in self-reflection, involves the learner in understanding their growth, but also involves the teacher in developing the kind of meta-language and using the kind of meta-language that will afford the learner opportunities to know what has happened with their growth, what might have been some inhibitors to their growth, and most certainly what are the enablers to their growth. So as a package, being able to have good assessment data, good assessment mechanisms, and good assessment and data literacy will allow us to have the kind of teaching and learning that is desired in every context. The next point is that we really should be able to monitor the impact of our teaching as it happens, not a term later, not a week later, in fact not even a day later, but as we are teaching. And for that reason, we have identified our instructional model to be the gradual release of responsibility, because between the 4 phases of the gradual release of responsibility, we have the checking for understanding, which allow us to monitor the impact of our teaching and make accurate, in time, timely adjustments to make sure that we offer the appropriate interventions for students who may need a different way to learn something, or for students who need to be stretched, so that the teaching and learning is beneficial to all students. So the next way, I guess, that we are going to improve and we're going to sustain an effective way of teaching and learning is by building practice excellence. And so what does that mean? It means that in a learning organization, we see our students, our teachers, our leadership, our wider community, even our community of practice, as learners who need to be embracing learning as an ongoing process. So FISO tells us that teachers, principals and schools need to work together to have common and agreed understandings and exchange knowledge and ideas about what teaching and assessment approaches are most effective for their organization. For that to happen, we need to have a very strong culture of collaboration. And collaboration does not mean that we will all get together and express our point of view and be unquestionably respectful of each other's point of view. Collaboration actually means that there will be a respectful challenge, that there will be a respectful sharing of evidence, that a particular approach might be more effective than another, that there will be an agreed approach to examining the research, and that coming to a common understanding that is then going to be implemented by all. So collaboration is a very intentional and strategic process, rather than a process of just get together and talk about something. We also need to be mindful that we need to have mastered the learning interventions that students need. I want to make a point here that we don't need to be narrow in our translation or our understanding of the word intervention. Interventions are there for all students, those who may need additional support, those who might need a little bit of tweaking in what's happening, but also those who need to be stretched. In fact, we've learned from international examination of the data that globally we tend to do rather poorly in the area of accelerating students at the top. So when I talk about learning interventions, I want to invite you respectfully to know that interventions are there for all students, not just those who might have a particular difficulty in learning something. And finally, part of building practice excellence is that we need to ensure that students, teachers, leaders are very, they have mastered the process of giving feedback and the protocols for giving feedback. Apart from the fact that we know that feedback has the most effect size in teaching and learning, we also know that it's through feedback that we show our appreciation, our respect, our also the fact that we have engaged with another learner and we have sought to understand the way that learning or teaching has taken place, and we are giving appropriate feedback to allow the teachers and students and the learning community to move forward. So how then do our current practices of what we presently do at Cranbourne Secondary College align with the definition of practice excellence? Well, what we are very proud of, and rightly so, at Cranbourne Secondary College is that we have a great mechanism for building the kind of leadership that strengthens the succession planning of the school. Using distributed and effective leadership, transformative leadership in the school has been a focus for the last 3 to 4 years, but especially intensified, I guess, in the last couple of years. I am very confident that our middle leaders are very ready to step up, and I'm very confident that a lot of our subject leaders, a lot of our student leaders, and all types of leadership in the school are building their capacity and are ready to address the challenges of the next level in their leadership. So, and that has been through developing the capabilities of the leaders, using evidence and evidence-based and proven coaching and feedback methods, involved in workshops, working collaboratively as team of leaders, relentlessly focusing on improvement, having, through the use of protocol, developed a level of trust that allows them to hear the messages sent without any bias, and strengthening the way that we induct new teachers into the college so that they understand early on in their participation in this learning community how we do things around here in teaching and learning, in managing student behaviors, in addressing well-being, in having a harmonious and productive environment to learn in. So the research, because I spoke about evidence-based practice in our leadership, some of the research that has informed how we behave as leaders and how we strengthen the leadership capacity of the people is based on the 6 conditions to create effective senior leadership teams. And that comes from Wagman and his colleagues. an extensive research over a number of years. So what they are telling us about the 6 conditions are that we can split the conditions into 2 different categories. Those that are essential conditions, such as having the right people in leadership, having a real team, and I'll explain what all these terms mean, and also having a compelling direction. These are essentials. Without this, we really cannot have a leadership team. And what are some of the enablers that will enable the leadership team to be successful? Having sound structures, having a supportive context, and where needed, having team coaching. So let's have a look at what these terms mean, and I guess as you are participating actively in the learning community of this college, you may at times remember to look for evidence that these 6 principles are within the leadership team of the school. So what do we mean by a real team? Real team really means that they are groups of people who are together, they're bounded together, they are interdependent, and they're stable. So one of the things that we've learned from research over a large number of years is that where the team needs happens to change every year, where members of the team come and go, where the team is not stable, the team does not experience success. So for a team to be bounded, team members need to know the boundaries of the team. And that is not just who is included in the team and who is not included in the team, but also having very clear protocols and very clear structures about the roles and responsibilities of the members of the team. And that, I guess, part of the protocols will be how do the team members, all team members, support the team's goals. What do we mean by a compelling direction? Often we hear, and we just need to Google, I guess, the vision of any kind of school. And if you Google the visions of 10 schools, you're quite likely to find statements that are pretty much the same, apart from perhaps 1 or 2 words that may attempt to bring some idiosyncratic characteristic to the surface. Most of those statements are just generic statements, but having a compelling direction actually means something very different. It means that the direction of the school, when it comes to all areas of the strategic plan, is clear. It can be understood by all. It is challenging because it allows people to grow. It allows people to, it compels people, not just allows, but it compels people to be constantly looking at the research, constantly looking at evidence of impact, constantly looking at what can be done differently, what can be done more effectively. And I have purposefully chosen not to use words such as better or worse, because that is not what growth is about. Growth is about looking for not just challenging ways, but ways that are more effective, ways that will bring the compelling vision, the clear direction to fruition, and that is what is very important. So all the members of the senior leadership team need to be able to articulate a specific plan of action that will enable that compelling direction to be enacted. I am very proud of the practice of the leaders in this school, including the assistant principals in designing and enacting action plans every year. Those action plans are shared as well, so all leaders are cognizant, and all leaders are informed about the energies that will take place across the school, and that goes a long way to be building that collaborative structure, and that structure, that culture of trust. We know that teachers and leaders are time poor. There is nothing worse than bringing people together and having a meeting for the sake of a meeting to tick a box, as you know, if I can put it this way, without an agenda that is purposeful, intentional, and most of all uses the time that the leaders have wisely. So agendas need to be, they're powerful resources, I guess, for bringing people together, and they need to be designed in a way that every minute of the time that people have to meet is used purposefully and wisely. So finally, the research tells us that the most effective, for teams to be most effective, is when they work together to achieve an agreed outcome for the organization and for the people in the organization. This very altruistic goal, I guess, this very altruistic purpose of leadership teams is often, research tells us, what binds those teams together, because essentially it is the collective efficacy. It brings, it helps to build a collective efficacy. Okay, so what do we mean by the right people? We know that not all leadership teams consist of people who have spent the time to understand each other, spent the time to understand that compelling direction, and also spent the time to understand that protocols can be a respectful way of bringing a team together. So when we talk about the right people, we need to understand that it's vital that the people who are promoted to leadership are individuals with integrity, who will abide by the team decisions, because this is what collective efficacy is all about, and this is what using protocols and having trust is all about. Avoid political maneuvering, and I guess you could see that, you can translate that in any way that you can, but how it often becomes visible and it materializes is when leaders might leave a meeting and go back to a particular forum and say, I was told to tell you that, or they decided that, or guess what we have to do now, change again. So this kind of negative talk, political maneuvering, is very harmful to the organization, to the improvement of the organization, but it also tends at times to cripple the people in the organization who may want to embrace innovation, who may want to be doing things the way that things need to be done. The other is that a lot of the time the individuals who are in a leadership team need to know that sharing the accountability for the work that has to be done alleviates the stress, creates a culture of support and collaboration, and it means that all the leaders can have productive outcomes out of the work. So what the research says is that all these three elements that we've talked about are essential if the senior leadership teams are to be effective. So enablers then. So what are the enablers? The enablers are sound structure, right? So the sound structure means that we have a small team of leaders with meaningful tasks and clear norms of conduct. We've mentioned protocols before. I guess norms of conduct is just another word for working with protocols. Whilst the research talks about having not more than 10 members, it doesn't mean that all leadership teams will only have 10 members or that will always have 10 members. It is ideal that when teams come together to problem solve, to make decisions about strategic issues, issues that have repercussions, significant repercussions for the school, it might be worth considering structuring the team in a way where a smaller number of people come together to unpack the problem of practice, to create a think tank, and then when the smaller teams have gone through a particular process, we can then come together as a larger team to get to know of each other's thinking and to come to an agreed understanding that includes the work of the smaller teams. We also know that having a team of experts does not ensure effectiveness. Often what happens is that people tend to want to protect or support or showcase their expertise. But unless the members of a team are able to come together to share, to integrate that expertise and ideas that they have, and to utilize everybody's strengths for the common good, to utilize everybody's strength for reaching a conclusion or a result that will benefit the organization, then that expertise, as high as it might be, is actually lost to the organization. What do we mean by supportive context? We mean that we really need to have the necessary conditions for leaders to be effective. So leaders need to have the correct information that the team needs to address a problem of practice. The teams need to have the right resource materials, whatever they might be according to the task. And they also need to be able to know that they will be supported to achieve their goals. Our leaders in this school are beginning to widely embrace the QQRT protocol for that, where having a clarity about what is to be done comes with the quantity and the quality of the work. So the first two Qs. The R stands for resources. What resources do we immediately identify, and what resources might we identify as we are in the process of exploring or solving a problem of practice. And the T that stands for timeline. We need to be clear about the timeline available to us to do the work. So working with that particular protocol in a way addresses this supportive context enabler. And finally, team coaching. It is about building the capacity of the team and building the capacity of the team as a group. Coaching doesn't necessarily mean that we have to look for outside experts to come in and tell us how to do the work, even though at times that is very beneficial to work with experts when we have identified that this is necessary. Most of the time, it is what the group does within the group. So it is about having a trust. Where there is absence of trust, the team cannot work together. It is about working with the protocol so that there is, we eliminate the fear of conflict. So a lot of people, if there is no protocol that dictates that we can respectfully challenge each other, that we can ask, for example, what makes you say that? That they fear that if they ask a question, they may cause conflict within a team. And so certain opinions or certain ideas in the think tank go unchallenged because of that fear of conflict. If team members lack commitment to the team, if they feel that they were put in that role and they don't want to be there, or I'm here for my own good, or you know what, I don't really care, I just want this to be over because I want to go home. Where there is lack of commitment, the team will not be successful. Another element is the element of accountability. If we avoid accountability, if we cannot take responsibility for our own actions, if we cannot take responsibility for meeting the accountability of a particular process as a collective, again, we cannot be successful. And the last one is inattention to results. If we don't care, and if we have not already identified what something, an action will look like if it is successful. In other words, if we have not identified all the elements that need to come together to be present for a particular task to be effective, then we do not have a competent and capable leadership team. And finally, the research that kind of has captured this and brought this all together, especially about the coaching, is the research from Joyce and Showers that tells us that the best form of coaching is when members of the organization, members of the leadership team work with each other and they learn with and from another. Because these are the people that understand their context, these are the people that have a common goal, a common accountability, and so working together to learn about how to solve the problem of practice, developing skills, problem solving skills, collaboration, communication skills, whatever the skills are that are required for that problem of practice, will ensure the utmost transfer of those capabilities when it comes to working effectively as leaders.